The night settles softly, as though the world itself exhales after a long day, and you find yourself wrapped in a sense of stillness that feels both familiar and ancient. In this quiet moment, when the hum of daytime thoughts grows faint, a gentle curiosity begins to rise, subtle, unhurried, like a question that has been waiting patiently at the edge of awareness. It's a question humanity has whispered for centuries in myths, in dreams, in the private darkness of night. Who are the beings that people claim to encounter when the line between waking and sleep grows thin? And among them, why do so many describe tall, delicate, almost priest-like figures, the mantis beings, who seem to watch, study, and sometimes comfort? You lie back, knowing this journey will not demand anything from you. No belief, no conclusion, just an openness to story, history, and the quiet mystery of the night. The goal is simply to drift, gently, through centuries of human wondering. As your body settles, the mind becomes softer, more spacious, more able to hold ideas without gripping them. This is the ideal state to begin exploring something as strange and delicate as the mantis phenomenon, because the boundary between curiosity and calm becomes seamless here. Throughout human history, nights like this have been the canvas for extraordinary experiences. The Sumerians spoke of insect-like watchers from the stars, guardians who observed humanity's early steps. Ancient Egypt carved beings with elongated limbs and serene faces, entities connected to knowledge, transformation, and the structure of life itself. These depictions were not literal in the modern sense, but they reflected a persistent idea that in the stillness of the night, something greater could communicate with the human mind. Historians debate whether these patterns are coincidence, symbolic, or echoes of something people have been sensing for thousands of years. Either way, the repetition is hard to ignore. Modern psychology has its own language for nighttime visitations. Researchers describe the hypnagogic state, the gentle slide between wakefulness and sleep, as a moment when the brain becomes highly imaginative and deeply receptive. In this threshold state, people often report floating sensations, unusual clarity, or impressions of presences nearby. Sleep specialists note that the brain produces vivid imagery here, blending memory, imagination, and subtle bodily sensations into dreamlike experiences that feel profoundly real. Yet, even within this scientific framework, many cases don't fit easily into explanation. Some individuals report details far beyond what typical sleep hallucinations produce. Coherent communication, complex visuals, recurring figures. And often, those figures match descriptions given by strangers from entirely different cultures. This is where the mystery begins, not with dramatic stories, but with quiet consistency. People from Europe, North America, Africa, and Asia, people who have never met and have no shared background, describe tall beings, around 7 to 9 feet in height, with slender limbs and large, triangular heads reminiscent of a praying mantis. Their demeanor is often described as calm, contemplative, even compassionate. These beings do not behave like creatures from horror films. Instead, they appear more like ancient monks or scientists, observing without intrusion, communicating through thoughts rather than words. Most encounters occur at night, when the air is still and the mind is drifting, exactly like this moment now. Official reports rarely acknowledge such beings directly. Government investigations into UFOs focus on craft, radar anomalies, and physical evidence, rarely discussing occupants unless absolutely unavoidable. Yet many witness accounts, especially those studied by psychologists and researchers beginning in the 1960s, mention these mantis-like figures with surprising frequency. Scientists caution that memory is complex, especially around sleep, but researchers also admit that the level of detail and emotional intensity in these accounts is difficult to dismiss entirely. Something is happening in the quiet hours of the night, whether in the mind, in the world, or in the thin space between the two. As you sink deeper into your own sense of rest, imagine the way humans have always used the night as a time for reflection. Tribal elders told stories under starlit skies. Monks meditated through the dark hours. Explorers charted constellations in silence. The night has always been a realm of openness, a place where unusual thoughts find room to surface without judgment. In this softened mental space, people throughout history have felt guided, watched over, or studied by beings beyond ordinary understanding. Whether these experiences came from within or beyond the self, they shaped cultures and beliefs in profound ways. Here, in your own quiet moment, the idea of the mantis being becomes less like a creature and more like a symbol of inquiry, an invitation to explore humanity's deepest questions about creation, consciousness, and connection. These beings, whether literal or metaphorical, represent curiosity itself, calm, observant, and endlessly fascinated by the mystery of life. And as the night deepens around you, you can let the story unfold gently, following its threads not with urgency, but with a drifting, dreamlike sense of wonder. You do not need to solve anything. You do not need to decide what is real or unreal. You are only here to listen, breathe, and allow the mind to wander softly into the unknown, exactly the space where humanity's greatest mysteries have always lived. The story of the mantis beings in modern times does not begin with a single event, but rather with a slow gathering of whispers, reports, and uncanny similarities that surfaced as humanity entered the age of flight, space exploration, and global communication. In the early and mid-20th century, long before alien imagery became a staple of movies and television, individuals from isolated parts of the world began describing encounters with tall, insect-like figures. These descriptions emerged during an era marked by uncertainty. Nations recovering from war, governments experimenting with new technologies, and ordinary people trying to understand a rapidly changing world. It was in this environment of tension and curiosity that the modern mantis narrative took shape, quietly threading through UFO reports, paranormal studies, and personal testimonies. During the 1950s and 1960s, the UFO phenomenon exploded into public consciousness. People were suddenly reporting strange lights in the sky, silent craft hovering over farmland, and beings unlike anything in known biology. Most described the classic little gray aliens, but others spoke of something different: taller figures with long limbs, narrow torsos, and faces that resembled praying mantises. Researchers of that era, such as John Keel, were surprised at the consistency of these descriptions despite the lack of communication between witnesses. Keel noted that many of these stories came from individuals who had no familiarity with each other or with the idea of insectoid beings at all. This caught the attention of investigators because the human imagination tends to produce varied and personal imagery, not highly consistent forms across time and geography. Even earlier than this, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, a few explorers and mystics had documented dreamlike encounters with tall, insect-faced figures during meditation or illness-induced trances. These accounts were classified as spiritual visions rather than extraterrestrial encounters, because the concept of alien visitors was not yet part of public thought. Yet the similarities between those visions and modern reports hint at a phenomenon that did not originate with science fiction. Anthropologists studying these writings noticed patterns that seemed to predate our era of UFO fascination. Whether these visions reflect psychological archetypes or describe a real presence humanity occasionally encounters remains an open question. As the Cold War deepened, governments around the world became increasingly invested in monitoring anything unusual in the skies. Radar anomalies, unidentified craft, and pilot sightings were quietly documented, even as officials publicly dismissed UFOs as misidentifications or illusions. In this climate of secrecy and national competition, civilian researchers began gathering reports independently. Many of these investigators were startled to find that abductees and contactees described not only technological elements, strange lights, metallic rooms, or flight sensations, but also beings involved in what seemed like biological or observational procedures. Among these entities, the mantis-like figures were unique. They appeared composed, authoritative, and often seemed to oversee other beings in the experience, suggesting a role of leadership or scientific expertise. Psychologists studying these early accounts tried to explain them through known cognitive phenomena. Sleep paralysis was often proposed as the primary cause, since it can produce intense visions and a sense of presence. However, many witnesses insisted they were fully awake, actively moving, or outdoors when they encountered these beings. Others described conversations or telepathic exchanges that were coherent and emotionally rich, more detailed than typical hallucinations. This created tension between scientific interpretation and personal testimony. For researchers who valued empirical data, the mantis stories were troubling because they were too structured to dismiss easily, yet too extraordinary to accept without question. The development of hypnotic regression as a therapeutic tool added a new layer to the narrative. In the 1970s and 1980s, individuals seeking answers for missing time, persistent dreams, or unexplained anxiety underwent hypnosis, revealing memories of encounters with mantis-like beings. Critics argued that hypnosis could create false memories, but even among those concerned, something stood out. The descriptions remained remarkably similar from person to person. Long bodies, dark eyes, gentle but distant demeanors, and a sense that these beings possessed ancient knowledge. Skeptics acknowledge that cultural influence can shape such stories, but they struggled to explain why people with no exposure to UFO material described nearly identical figures. As mass media expanded, reports of alien encounters became more widely discussed. Yet interestingly, the mantis archetype did not appear frequently in movies or TV shows, which makes its persistence in testimony even more curious. Popular culture focused on greys, reptiles, or humanoid beings, leaving the mantis form largely untouched. Researchers found this absence significant because it meant that witnesses were not drawing inspiration from mainstream imagery. Instead, they seemed to be tapping into something less public, less widely known, yet deeply ingrained across disparate experiences. By the late 20th century, the narrative had become clearer. The mantis beings consistently appeared as observers or overseers, calm and methodical, often connected to themes of evolution, consciousness, or biological study. Those who encountered them commonly described a mixture of awe and fear, not terror, but the kind of fear one feels when facing something vastly intelligent and deeply unknown. These emotions were similar to reactions recorded in ancient cultural encounters with gods, spirits, or otherworldly messengers, suggesting that humanity has long interpreted the extraordinary through familiar symbols. Modern witnesses, living in an age of science and space exploration, naturally describe their encounters using extraterrestrial language rather than religious terms. As the years passed and more accounts accumulated, researchers began to realize that the mantis narrative was not a fringe curiosity, but a recurring thread in the tapestry of anomalous experiences. Whether the result of subconscious archetypes, shared human psychology, or contact with an external intelligence, the pattern was undeniable. And so the modern story of the mantis beings took shape not as a single extraordinary event, but as an unfolding puzzle that continues to intrigue experiencers, scientists, and storytellers alike. In the quiet of night, these early reports echo softly through time, inviting deeper exploration into who, or what, these beings might be, and why their presence seems woven into both our ancient past and our modern imagination. Across the ancient world, long before the vocabulary of extraterrestrials existed, humans left behind stories, carvings, and rituals that quietly echo the shapes and behaviors described in modern mantis encounters. In civilizations separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, people depicted tall, slender beings with elongated limbs and large, angular faces, forms that today resemble the silhouette of a praying mantis. These figures were not portrayed as monsters, but as guides, creators, or guardians. Their presence in mythology raises questions about where such imagery originated and why it appears so consistently across cultures that had no known contact with one another. Even historians who approach these patterns with skepticism acknowledge that the thematic similarities are striking. In ancient Mesoamerican cultures, for example, certain deities were described as having insect-like attributes combined with human intelligence. Some were said to communicate with humans through dreams or altered states, guiding them toward knowledge or warning them of danger. These beings were often linked to fertility, transformation, or the origins of human life. anthropologists interpret these myths as symbolic. Yet the resemblance to modern descriptions of insectoid visitors is difficult to ignore. When these cultures spoke of sky beings who shaped humanity, they often used metaphors connected to weaving, crafting, or modifying life. Language that aligns eerily with today's narratives about genetic involvement by advanced entities. Across the ocean, in parts of Africa, oral traditions preserve stories of tall, mantis-faced beings who arrived from the heavens during times of great transformation. The San people of southern Africa, for instance, revered a deity associated with the praying mantis, considering it a mediator between the physical world and the unseen realm. While these stories are not direct evidence of extraterrestrial contact, they reveal how ancient cultures viewed the praying mantis as a symbol of intelligence, patience, and hidden power. The insect was not just another creature. It was revered as something connected to a higher order of consciousness. This reverence lends an interesting layer to modern encounters. Were these ancient people interpreting the same type of being through their own cultural lens? Or were they simply assigning spiritual meaning to an ordinary insect? In ancient Egypt, elongated skulls, narrow faces, and slender bodies appeared in art and hieroglyphs, representing gods associated with wisdom, transformation, and the afterlife. While Egyptian iconography is often stylized, some researchers argue that these depictions mirror what modern witnesses describe as mantis-like beings, tall, almost regal figures with delicate, tapered features. Egyptian mythology also contains references to beings who manipulated the structure of life, shaping humans for divine purposes. These stories are most likely symbolic, yet they highlight how deeply ancient cultures connected the idea of creation with beings who were not entirely human. Whether these figures were purely symbolic or based on something more mysterious remains open to interpretation. Meanwhile, in Southeast Asia, ancient texts reference beings with insect-like characteristics who appeared in dreams or meditative visions, serving as spiritual teachers. These entities were described as patient and observant, often imparting knowledge about the natural world and human consciousness. Monks documented encounters during deep meditation, noting that these beings communicated through impressions or images rather than spoken language, similar to the telepathic communication modern experiencers often describe. While skeptics view these visions as psychological products of trance states, others see them as part of a long-standing pattern of contact that transcends culture and time. Beyond mythology, ancient genetic myths are particularly intriguing. Nearly every major civilization has stories explaining how humans were shaped, modified, or uplifted by godlike beings. The Sumerians spoke of deities who designed humans by mixing the essence of gods with the blood of earth. The Greeks told of Prometheus sculpting humanity from clay and imbuing them with intelligence. Indigenous myths from the Americas describe sky beings who descended to teach humans how to live, cultivate crops, and understand the stars. While these stories may be metaphorical, their shared emphasis on external intervention in human development parallels modern narratives about genetic experiments attributed to mantis beings. Historians and anthropologists often argue that these stories reflect humanity's desire to explain sudden leaps in development, such as agriculture, writing, or architecture. Yet the repeating motif of tall, non-human teachers continues to raise questions. Why were these beings nearly always described as taller, wiser, and observing humanity from a distance? Why did so many cultures perceive them as interested in human survival, evolution, or consciousness? These mysteries contribute to the layered intrigue surrounding the mantis archetype. Psychologists propose that archetypes rooted in human perception may explain some of these patterns. The praying mantis, with its upright posture and large, reflective eyes, has always fascinated humans. It appears both serene and predatory, calm yet alert, qualities that make it symbolically rich. Perhaps ancient people imbued the mantis with spiritual significance because its behavior and appearance stirred deep psychological responses. If so, the modern sightings could be a continuation of this archetype emerging in contemporary form. Yet this explanation struggles when confronted with the specific, detailed, and remarkably consistent features reported across different cultures and eras. Another angle considers the role of altered states, dreams, rituals, meditation, fever, and near-death experiences in shaping these encounters. Throughout history, humans have used altered consciousness to seek guidance or insight, believing that other realms or beings could communicate during these states. Modern reports of mantis beings often occur during similar threshold moments, drifting to sleep, waking suddenly, or experiencing sleep paralysis. The parallel timing between ancient visions and modern encounters suggests that these experiences may arise from the same mysterious space where the boundaries of the mind loosen and perception expands. Whether the mantis archetype represents real beings, symbolic guides, or projections of deep psychological processes, its presence in ancient mythology forms an important part of the larger story. It shows that humanity has long sensed or imagined intelligence beyond the ordinary human form, often linked to creation, knowledge, and transformation. These ancient echoes create a foundation for understanding why modern witnesses interpret their experiences as encounters with entities deeply connected to human origins. And as the story continues into later sections, these ancient patterns help illuminate why the mantis narrative remains so compelling, persistent, and strangely familiar. In the quiet, dimly lit rooms where people first share their stories, a pattern begins to emerge, one that is both delicate and astonishing. Witnesses across decades, continents, and cultures describe encounters with beings that defy ordinary understanding. They speak of figures taller than any human, with limbs that seem elongated and precise, their hands long and thin, moving with deliberate grace. Their heads, triangular or angular, tilt in a way that conveys attention and intelligence, and their large, dark eyes appear to see beyond the surface of the world. These are the mantis beings, and the consistency of these descriptions is striking, even when the people recounting them have no prior exposure to popular media depictions. Many encounters occur at night, in moments of vulnerability or transition between wakefulness and sleep. One common scenario involves waking in the middle of the night and sensing a presence in the room. Witnesses often report an immediate feeling of awareness, a quiet, intense observation. Some describe being paralyzed, unable to move, yet fully conscious of their surroundings. This is not fear in the cinematic sense, but a mix of awe, vulnerability, and profound curiosity. In other cases, people have recounted being gently led or guided by the beings, often to spaces that feel luminous, silent, and alive with subtle energy. The atmosphere is rarely threatening. Rather, it carries a weight of intelligence and purpose. Under hypnosis, certain individuals recall being brought aboard rooms that are stark, minimalist, and softly lit, with surfaces that emit a gentle glow. The beings are described as moving methodically, their attention focused on instruments, charts, or even the human body itself. Some experiencers speak of telepathic communication, receiving impressions rather than words. These impressions often relate to human biology, evolution, or consciousness, sometimes describing concepts that feel beyond the witness's normal understanding. Psychologists have noted that these memories carry an unusual emotional resonance. They feel truer than ordinary dreams or daydreams, leaving witnesses both awed and contemplative long after the event. Across different accounts, common elements continue to appear. Witnesses describe a sense of timelessness within these encounters, as though minutes stretch into hours or vice versa. Many report that their own consciousness seems heightened, more attuned to subtle vibrations, patterns, or rhythms around them. The mantis beings themselves are described as calm, patient, and deeply intelligent. Unlike depictions of fearsome extraterrestrials, these figures are meticulous and often silent, communicating not through speech, but through gestures, impressions, or a form of understanding that transcends language. Some experiencers recall feeling studied, not in a clinical or cruel sense, but with an almost academic curiosity. Eyewitnesses' accounts also suggest that these encounters are not random. Many describe being chosen for interaction because of sensitivity, curiosity, or personal history. One recurring theme involves the study of human genetics, or the essence of life itself. Instruments, light panels, and subtle biological manipulations are frequently described, though the exact nature of these procedures remains mysterious. For some witnesses, the encounters feel like a lesson in human potential or evolution, rather than an experiment in the traditional sense. These impressions linger, creating a sense of purpose or connection that is both comforting and enigmatic. The global consistency of these encounters continues to puzzle researchers. A person in rural Europe may describe nearly the same figure, with the same proportions and behaviors, as someone in North America or Africa, despite having no access to similar media or stories. Psychologists propose that archetypes could explain this repetition, shared images and motifs embedded in the human subconscious, but the level of detail, emotional depth, and specific behaviors described suggest something more than simple imagination. Some researchers argue that the experiences may occupy a threshold space between waking and dreaming, a zone where perception can access layers of reality not normally accessible. Not all encounters are entirely passive. Some witnesses report being taken to distant landscapes, strange laboratories, or luminous corridors. The beings are careful, attentive, and often seem to observe multiple aspects of the person simultaneously, their body, mind, and perhaps something beyond. Many experiencers emerge with a heightened sense of self, introspection, or empathy, as if the encounter had opened a door within their own consciousness. This psychological effect has been studied in a limited fashion. The encounter itself often leaves a lasting imprint, encouraging reflection, creativity, or a reassessment of life priorities. The mantis being's influence on witnesses often extends beyond the moment of encounter. Dreams may recur for weeks or months, echoing the shapes, sounds, or sensations felt during the interaction. Some experiencers report that they develop new interests in biology, meditation, or the study of consciousness. Others describe a subtle recalibration of fear and trust. The night no longer feels empty or threatening, but charged with potential, with possibility, with quiet intelligence. These aftereffects, though subjective, suggest that the experience is not merely imagined. It is deeply meaningful to the person who lives it. Skeptics emphasize that memory is fallible, particularly when recall occurs years after the event or under hypnosis. They point out that suggestion, cultural knowledge, and individual imagination can shape and embellish recollections. Yet researchers note that even with these variables, the repeated imagery and behavioral patterns remain remarkably consistent. The global distribution of reports, combined with the specificity of features and interactions, makes the mantis encounters a particularly compelling phenomenon to study. They are not only strange, they are structured, coherent, and emotionally resonant in a way that ordinary hallucinations rarely are. In the calm, reflective state of night, the stories of these witnesses take on an almost meditative quality. The mantis beings appear not as frightening intruders, but as patient observers, guiding humans into moments of introspection, awareness, and quiet wonder. Their presence, consistent yet mysterious, invites both curiosity and tranquility. Listeners, lying in the soft darkness, can imagine these beings with a sense of distance and calm, feeling the stillness of their watchful gaze and the gentle rhythm of their movements. The encounters, whether interpreted as real, archetypal, or psychological, offer a bridge between human consciousness and the vast unknown, a space that is safe to explore in thought, and gentle enough to let the mind drift slowly into rest. Among the recurring themes in accounts of mantis beings, one of the most compelling and mysterious involves their apparent interest in human biology, specifically DNA. Witnesses often describe experiences that suggest these beings are not merely observers, but careful examiners, attentive to the intricate structure of life itself. In many cases, people recall instruments that emit soft lights, delicate tools that hover near the body, or sensations of energy moving along the spine and into the mind. The beings themselves are described as patient and methodical, almost clinical in their approach, yet their purpose is not framed as harmful or threatening. Instead, there is a sense of purpose, of study, and of a deeper intelligence seeking to understand the essence of what makes us human. The fascination with genetics in these narratives is particularly striking when placed in historical context. The discovery of DNA's double helix structure by Watson and Crick in 1953 revolutionized biology, opening pathways that would eventually lead to genetic engineering and the mapping of the human genome. The fact that many mantis encounters describe the study of life codes, or biological essence, in ways that seem eerily aligned with contemporary genetics has led some researchers to pause. In stories from the 1960s and 1970s, decades before CRISPR or widespread public knowledge of genetic manipulation, witnesses described beings examining strands, energy patterns, or blueprints of life in ways that appear to prefigure modern scientific understanding. Skeptics often suggest coincidence, pattern recognition, or subconscious incorporation of media concepts. Yet the consistency across independent reports, with details unknown to the general public at the time, makes the phenomenon unusual and worthy of careful attention. Witnesses sometimes describe the beings explaining, not with words, but through impressions or telepathic images, that humans carry potential for evolution far beyond current understanding. These impressions are subtle, often felt as insight rather than literal instruction, and they frequently involve the idea that human DNA contains latent information, sequences or patterns that could unlock new capabilities. In some cases, experiencers recall seeing symbolic representations of life, energy flowing through cells, or luminous threads connecting themselves to a larger network of life. The sensory and emotional impact of these moments is profound, leaving individuals with a lingering sense that they have glimpsed something vast and ancient, something that human science is only beginning to understand. Anthropologists and cultural historians note that these themes mirror the myths of ancient civilizations. Many cultures told stories of deities or sky beings who shaped humanity's essence, altering flesh, spirit, or intelligence. The Sumerians described gods who crafted humans with specific attributes, blending divine essence with earthly matter. Mesoamerican myths spoke of beings descending from the stars to teach humans agriculture, mathematics, and astronomy, an indirect form of genetic guidance, in a symbolic sense. Modern mantis narratives echo these themes, but translate them into contemporary terms. Instead of divine clay or mystical instruction, the encounters involve biological observation, DNA strands, and telepathic impressions of life's blueprint. The continuity suggests that whether symbolic or literal, humans have long imagined or perceived higher intelligence interacting with the foundation of life itself. Researchers have considered psychological explanations, including heightened states of awareness, sleep paralysis, and altered consciousness, to account for these experiences. The brain, during hypnagogic or trance states, is capable of producing vivid imagery, tactile sensations, and even a sense of external presence. Yet many experiencers insist that their awareness was distinct, coherent, and persisting across time, with details that felt precise and consistent. Under hypnosis, some describe observing processes that mirror genetic manipulation, including sequences of light, patterns, and interactions that feel deliberate and informed. The question arises, are these purely internal visions shaped by subconscious knowledge and cultural expectations? Or are they glimpses of a phenomenon that defies conventional categorization? Interestingly, the connection between mantis beings and human biology is not confined to genetics alone. Witnesses often describe experiences in which consciousness itself is studied, as if the beings are not only examining the physical structure of DNA, but also the patterns of thought, memory, and awareness. This dual focus on body and mind aligns with recurring descriptions of the beings as both scientific and spiritual, methodical observers who respect the complexity of human life. Many experiencers report that the beings convey no judgment, only curiosity, and that this observation has a calming effect despite the strangeness of the encounter. The emotional tone is subtle, awe, calm attentiveness, and a sense of being seen in the deepest sense. Some accounts suggest that the study of DNA or life patterns is not purely scientific, but also instructional. Witnesses sometimes describe impressions or insights about potential healing, genetic resilience, or expanded cognitive capacity. These insights are rarely literal instructions. Rather, they appear as a form of experiential knowledge, an intimate understanding of what it means to be human and how human life could evolve. In this way, the narrative aligns with broader human themes: curiosity about our origins, the desire for self-improvement, and the longing to understand the mechanisms that govern life itself. Modern science provides a backdrop that enhances the resonance of these encounters. The rapid development of genomics, epigenetics, and bioinformatics over the past several decades mirrors, in some ways, the experiences described by witnesses decades earlier. Humans now know that tiny sequences of nucleotides can hold vast amounts of information, that genes interact in complex networks, and that even minor modifications can have profound effects. When people recount mantis encounters involving DNA observation or telepathic glimpses of life's blueprint, the similarity to our modern understanding of biology adds a layer of credibility, or at least intrigue, that captures the imagination. Ultimately, the focus on DNA in mantis encounters serves multiple purposes within the narrative. It bridges ancient myths with contemporary science, ties together physical and cognitive exploration, and offers a framework for understanding why these beings appear consistently across time and culture. Whether interpreted as literal visitors, projections of human consciousness, or archetypal symbols, the emphasis on life's underlying code reminds us of humanity's enduring fascination with the mechanics of existence. In the gentle quiet of night, these stories invite reflection on our biology, our potential, and the mysterious intelligence that seems to watch over and sometimes interact with the delicate patterns of life itself. As stories of mantis beings grew more numerous in the latter half of the 20th century, questions naturally arose about how governments and official institutions perceived or dismissed these phenomena. Publicly, authorities maintained a cautious distance. UFO investigations, when acknowledged, focus primarily on physical sightings of crafts, radar anomalies, and pilot reports, rarely delving into the occupant themselves. Programs such as Project Blue Book in the United States, which operated from the late 1940s to the late 1960s, officially concluded that most cases were explainable by natural phenomena or misidentification. Yet internal memos and declassified documents suggest a more nuanced reality. Officials were quietly tracking unusual reports, including those involving strange humanoid figures, sometimes dismissing them publicly while noting their peculiar consistency internally. This duality of public dismissal and private curiosity created an atmosphere in which strange, unverified experiences could circulate without official endorsement, yet remain compelling for those who encountered them. Whistleblower testimonies and statements from former officials add further layers to this narrative. Some claim that biological retrieval programs, remote viewing initiatives, or secretive research into anomalous phenomena occasionally intersected with descriptions of insectoid visitors. While these claims are difficult to verify, they do reflect a pattern of cautious observation. Governments often investigate without confirming or denying, maintaining secrecy in a way that fuels speculation while minimizing panic. In this light, the mantis encounters fit into a larger context of phenomena that resist simple classification. The beings are not mentioned in formal government files in the same manner as flying objects, but witness reports suggest that people were aware of interactions that were quietly acknowledged, or at least noted, by investigators behind closed doors. One particularly interesting aspect involves programs like the Stargate Project, which explored psychic phenomena for military purposes. Documents reveal that some remote viewing sessions recorded anomalous presences or figures resembling non-human intelligences. Analysts noted the difficulty in distinguishing literal observations from impressions generated by the mind during heightened focus or altered states. Some proponents of the extraterrestrial hypothesis suggest that mantis-like figures occasionally appeared in these sessions, though official reports describe them as symbolic anomalies or unidentified impressions. These findings illustrate the tension between the subjective experiences of individuals and the objective framework of governmental documentation. The lines are blurred, and interpretations remain cautious. Eyewitnesses who had encounters often sensed a presence of oversight, a feeling that authorities or institutions were aware of aspects of their experiences. Some reported subtle interactions with officials who appeared unusually informed, hinting at the existence of programs or investigations that were never publicly disclosed. Others encountered investigators who were strictly professional, analyzing testimonies for patterns without offering explanations. The effect of this subtle oversight reinforced the sense that these beings and perhaps their observations were part of a broader, hidden framework of knowledge, one that humanity glimpsed only partially, and always with a sense of both wonder and restraint. Media coverage also played a role in shaping perceptions. Newspapers and television reports in the 1950s and 1960s often sensationalized UFO sightings, focusing on strange lights, crashes, or little green men, while omitting detailed accounts of humanoid or insectoid beings. Researchers note that this selective reporting influenced public expectations, highlighting the sensational while leaving the subtler, more consistent reports of mantis beings largely confined to personal testimony. Consequently, these accounts circulated in private networks among researchers, contactees, and writers, creating an informal archive that remained largely invisible to the general population. This pattern helped maintain a quiet credibility. While the public heard tales of flying objects, those studying the encounters could observe the consistency of beings' appearances, behaviors, and reported purposes across decades. Some declassified documents hint at the procedural challenges investigators faced. Military and intelligence analysts were trained to prioritize tangible evidence, radar returns, photographic images, or physical debris, over subjective testimony. A report might note, subject describes tall, humanoid figure with elongated features, but such details were frequently excluded from conclusions or classified as anecdotal. In effect, the beings themselves became a gray area, real enough to be recorded, but abstract enough to remain officially unacknowledged. This procedural gap may explain why mantis encounters persisted in private, unexplained spaces, fostering both intrigue and a sense of quiet mystery for those involved. Even contemporary whistleblowers emphasize the difficulty of fully verifying the phenomena. Claims of biological research or observational programs are often couched in anonymity and indirect reference, making it impossible to confirm details. Yet the consistency of claims across independent sources, paired with the historical record of government interest in anomalous phenomena, lends a subtle credibility to the narrative. The impression is not one of conspiracy for its own sake, but of systematic observation of occurrences that challenge conventional scientific frameworks. The beings, therefore, occupy a liminal space between official documentation, personal experience, and broader cultural imagination. Through these layers, official programs, declassified documents, media framing, and eyewitness testimony, a portrait emerges of the mantis beings not as fantastical creatures relegated to fiction, but as figures consistently reported within human experience, quietly intersecting with institutions tasked with observing the unusual. They are observed, noted, and sometimes studied, yet they remain elusive, unconfirmed in official channels, and resistant to simple categorization. For those who encounter or research them, this duality is part of the fascination. The beings appear both intimately present and impossibly distant, part of a hidden reality that humanity has glimpsed only in fragments. This quiet tension, the intersection of witness testimony, governmental acknowledgement, and public denial, serves as a mirror to the encounters themselves. Just as the mantis beings are careful, measured, and methodical in their interaction with humans, the institutions that track anomalous phenomena are deliberate, cautious, and elusive. The beings are neither overtly threatening nor entirely accessible, and the frameworks observing them mirror this subtle balance. In this way, the stories of mantis beings extend beyond the personal into the structural. They exist in the interplay between human perception, institutional scrutiny, and the unknown, creating a layered, enduring mystery that continues to captivate those who are willing to explore it gently, thoughtfully, and with quiet wonder. The phenomenon of mantis beings has inspired a wide spectrum of interpretations, each attempting to make sense of encounters that seem to stretch the boundaries of ordinary human experience. Some suggest the simplest explanation, that these beings are extraterrestrial visitors from another planet or star system who observe and, in some cases, interact with humans. Proponents of this view note the consistency in physical description, behaviors, and purpose reported across decades and continents. The extraterrestrial hypothesis frames the mantis beings as advanced life forms, capable of technology and intelligence far beyond our own, whose interest in human biology and consciousness reflects a long-term observational role. This perspective resonates with those who view the encounters as literal, physical interactions, albeit one that often occurs at the edges of perception, during sleep, trance, or other liminal states. Yet other researchers suggest a different approach: interdimensionality. This theory posits that mantis beings might not originate from distant planets at all, but from layers of reality that coexist with our own. According to this perspective, these entities can shift into and out of our perceptible world, appearing selectively to individuals who are sensitive or attuned. Jacques Vallée, a prominent researcher of anomalous phenomena, has long argued that some encounters are best understood as interactions with other dimensions or realities, rather than visitors from space. The mantis beings' reported ability to appear in private spaces, their seemingly telepathic communication, and their knowledge of human biology could support the idea that they are not bound by the same physical constraints as we are. The interdimensional theory emphasizes perception and consciousness, framing encounters as both subjective and objective in ways that challenge traditional scientific assumptions. Psychological interpretations offer yet another lens. Cognitive scientists and skeptics argue that these experiences may arise from archetypes embedded in the human psyche. Carl Jung described archetypal images as universal symbols appearing across cultures and time, often emerging during dreamlike or altered states of consciousness. In this context, mantis beings could be a manifestation of the observer archetype, tall, intelligent, alien in form, representing the human mind's projection of intelligence, oversight, or higher understanding. Sleep paralysis, hypnagogic hallucinations, and other threshold state phenomena may amplify these images, creating experiences that feel profoundly real. From this perspective, the beings are not external visitors, but deeply meaningful internal constructs, reflections of our subconscious desire to explore the unknown and understand ourselves. Folklorists and anthropologists add another layer, viewing mantis encounters as modern iterations of older myths. Across ancient cultures, people told stories of insect-like gods, sky visitors, and luminous teachers who guided humanity's development. From the Sumerians to the Sand people of Africa, these figures were associated with knowledge, evolution, and creation. Folklorists suggest that today's mantis narratives may be the continuation of these archetypal myths, translated into contemporary language and interpreted through modern understanding of science, consciousness, and space. The consistent features, the tall form, elongated limbs, angular head, may be symbolic echoes that persist across centuries, resonating deeply within human imagination. Some theories attempt to combine these perspectives. Certain researchers propose that mantis beings may be both external and archetypal, an interface between reality and consciousness. In this framework, the beings could exist independently in another dimension or planet, yet their manifestation to human witnesses is filtered through perception, memory, and culture. The duality explains why encounters feel both intensely real and dreamlike, why they carry emotional resonance without always leaving tangible evidence, and why the descriptions remain consistent while the context varies widely. It also accounts for reports of telepathic communication and apparent understanding of genetics or consciousness, phenomena that challenge a purely materialistic interpretation. An important aspect of all interpretations is the emotional tone of the encounters. Across cultures, decades, and individual reports, witnesses consistently describe feelings of awe, calm, and profound attention rather than terror or aggression. This emotional consistency suggests that whatever the origin of the beings, extraterrestrial, interdimensional, psychological, or symbolic, they are perceived as observing with curiosity and intelligence rather than malevolence. Even those who initially experience fear often report that it transforms into reverence or deep introspection. The being's presence seems to invite reflection, fostering an inner dialogue about life, evolution, and consciousness itself. Modern neuroscientific studies provide context for these experiences without fully explaining them. The human brain, during sleep, hypnagogia, or meditative states, is capable of producing vivid, coherent imagery, heightened perception, and the illusion of external observation. Yet the specificity, emotional depth, and repeated global patterns of mantis encounters push against purely neurological explanations. Experiencers often recall precise interactions, subtle gestures, and detailed impressions of biological processes, elements that feel externalized in ways that ordinary dreams rarely achieve. The tension between subjective perception and objective reality lies at the heart of the debate. Are the mantis beings projections of the mind, independent intelligences, or something that exists at the intersection of both? The variety of theories also reflects human attempts to reconcile wonder with rationality. Some people are drawn to the extraterrestrial explanation because it situates the phenomenon within a framework of exploration, technology, and other worlds. Others prefer interdimensional interpretations because they accommodate the surreal and often dreamlike qualities of encounters. Psychological and symbolic approaches resonate with those who value archetypal meaning and introspection. No single theory fully accounts for every reported experience, yet each adds depth to the understanding of why these beings persist in human consciousness, why they appear across cultures, and why their presence continues to intrigue, unsettle, and inspire curiosity. Ultimately, the competing interpretations highlight a central truth. The mantis beings, whether imagined, external, or somewhere in between, occupy a space that challenges human understanding. They exist at the edge of perception, bridging mystery and awareness, science and myth, imagination and observation. In this liminal space, listeners are invited to consider the possibilities gently, allowing the mind to explore without rushing toward conclusion. The calm and deliberate nature of the beings themselves mirrors the investigative approach we take, careful, observant, and open to the full spectrum of what reality, internal and external, may offer. Throughout human history, strange and remarkable beings have found their way into the stories, dreams, and imaginations of cultures worldwide. The mantis beings, with their tall, angular forms and deliberate, observant movements, have similarly left a subtle but persistent mark on contemporary culture. Though less prevalent in mainstream media than the gray alien archetype, they have appeared in films, literature, and digital art, often as enigmatic, intelligent figures whose presence conveys mystery, wisdom, or quiet menace. Filmmakers and writers are drawn to their unusual physiology and otherworldly poise, which immediately signals intelligence and difference without resorting to aggression or horror. In these representations, the beings become a canvas for exploring human fascination with the unknown, bridging fear and curiosity, science and symbolism. Interestingly, these cultural depictions often reflect patterns reported in actual encounters rather than creating them. Researchers note that many witness descriptions predate their appearances in popular media, suggesting that the mantis beings are not simply products of fiction, but rather that fiction has occasionally borrowed from lived experience. Artists, writers, and filmmakers have long mined unexplained phenomena for inspiration, creating visuals and narratives that feel familiar precisely because they echo human experience. This dynamic feedback loop between real reports and cultural representation can make it challenging to distinguish which came first. Yet it also underscores the profound impact these encounters have on collective imagination. Digital culture has amplified this effect. Online forums, social media groups, and video platforms allow experiencers to share their stories widely, often with illustrations, sketches, or computer-generated interpretations of the beings they encountered. These shared representations spread globally, sometimes influencing new reports, but more often validating and normalizing the archetype. Individuals from distant countries, who might never have interacted, describe remarkably similar features: the triangular head, the large reflective eyes, the long limbs, and the calm, intelligent demeanor. Even when these images circulate online, they rarely distort the core characteristics. The mantis form remains consistent, as if anchored in something deeper than aesthetics, a shared memory, perception, or archetypal image embedded within human consciousness. Beyond visual culture, literature has embraced the subtlety and complexity of the mantis beings. Science fiction and speculative fiction authors frequently draw upon their presence to explore themes of intelligence, evolution, and ethics. Unlike conventional alien invaders, these beings are rarely antagonistic. Their purpose is often observational or educational, emphasizing curiosity rather than conquest. This portrayal aligns closely with witness testimony, creating a bridge between lived experience and cultural interpretation. Readers encounter a being that is unfamiliar yet coherent, unsettling yet wise, whose intentions are transparent in their careful attention and deliberate actions. Literature, therefore, becomes a conduit for reflecting the emotional and cognitive patterns described by experiencers, allowing audiences to engage with the phenomenon imaginatively while retaining the sense of calm curiosity associated with it. The influence of mantis beings also extends into dreams and personal imagination. Psychologists and anthropologists note that humans are particularly susceptible to archetypal imagery when fatigued, meditating, or experiencing altered states of consciousness. Once a symbol enters cultural awareness, through media, stories, or oral tradition, it can appear in dreams, visions, or hallucinations, shaping personal experiences. Yet the interesting aspect of mantis encounters is that the imagery seems remarkably stable, even before widespread public dissemination. Many experiencers report encounters during sleep, twilight states, or meditation, long before seeing a visual representation in films or artwork. This stability suggests a resonance that is not purely cultural, but perhaps archetypal, embedded in a deeper psychological or even metaphysical framework. Even so, cultural influences cannot be discounted entirely. Exposure to media, conversation, or community can subtly shape the way an experience is interpreted or articulated. Someone might describe a figure as mantis-like after learning about such beings, even if the initial experience was ambiguous. Anthropologists consider this a natural part of human meaning-making. We interpret the unknown through familiar categories, including cultural imagery. What makes mantis encounters so compelling is that they maintain internal consistency despite these influences, suggesting that while culture may shape the narrative, the underlying experience is persistent and independent. The relationship between experience and culture also highlights the ways in which these beings affect the collective human imagination. Even if some encounters are influenced by prior depictions, the archetype itself encourages reflection on intelligence, ethics, and human potential. The mantis beings are often described as calm, deliberate, and profoundly observant, qualities that invite viewers, readers, and experiencers alike to consider what it means to be conscious, attentive, and responsible. They serve as a mirror, showing humanity both its curiosity and its capacity for awe, prompting questions about evolution, morality, and the unknown without demanding immediate answers. Ultimately, the cultural imprint of the mantis beings underscores a delicate balance between mystery and familiarity. Their consistent appearance across myths, personal testimonies, and modern media demonstrates that they occupy a unique space in human consciousness, not merely imagined, not wholly external, but a phenomenon that bridges the subjective and the shared. For those listening at night, contemplating these beings in the soft quiet of the dark, the mantis presence becomes a gentle invitation. They encourage reflection, inspire curiosity, and nurture a calm engagement with the unknown. In this way, culture does not distort the experience, but amplifies it, providing subtle frameworks that allow the mind to explore the beings safely, contemplatively, and with a sense of wonder that lulls thought into gentle, dreamlike flow. As our exploration of the mantis beings moves into modern times, it becomes clear that the phenomenon is not static, but evolving, shaped by new technologies, scientific discoveries, and ongoing witness experiences. In recent decades, reports have increased in volume and detail, aided by the global connectivity of the Internet. People now share stories across continents in real time, contributing to an informal database of experiences that include sketches, 3D renderings, and even amateur video or photographic attempts to capture glimpses of these enigmatic figures. While tangible evidence remains scarce, the consistency of descriptions, tall, thin, angular, and calm, has only grown more striking, reinforcing the sense that these encounters are part of a persistent, global phenomenon rather than isolated incidents. Researchers and independent investigators continue to document and analyze these modern encounters, applying both traditional and innovative methods. Many focus on patterns of occurrence, times of night, environmental conditions, and emotional states during the experiences. Data suggests that most encounters occur during moments of transition, falling asleep, waking from sleep, or periods of deep meditation, moments when consciousness hovers between wakefulness and dream. Sleep specialists note that these liminal states are particularly receptive to unusual imagery, heightened intuition, and vivid sensory experiences. Yet the emotional and cognitive coherence of mantis encounters often surpasses what is typically observed in ordinary hypnagogic phenomena. Witnesses frequently report clear impressions of the being's intelligence, purpose, and detailed observation, as though interacting with entities that exist both within and beyond the mind. Modern technology has also provided new tools for analysis. Thermal imaging, night vision recording, and biometric monitoring have occasionally been employed by researchers attempting to detect physical correlates of reported encounters. While definitive visual or biological proof remains elusive, these investigations often reveal subtle anomalies, unexplained movements, temperature shifts, or electromagnetic variations coinciding with reported experiences. These findings are neither conclusive nor universally replicable, but they hint at a phenomenon that is not entirely confined to subjective perception. For some scientists, these subtle anomalies are enough to warrant cautious curiosity, while others remain skeptical, attributing such signals to environmental noise, human error, or psychological factors. The global spread of these reports has also prompted a comparative approach. Investigators now examine testimonies from different continents side by side, looking for consistent elements that transcend cultural context. Remarkably, certain traits of the mantis beings remain stable. Height, limb proportion, triangular head shape, large dark eyes, and an aura of calm intelligence. Behaviorally, they are often described as observing, studying, or guiding rather than aggressive. Telepathic or nonverbal communication appears repeatedly, as does an apparent interest in human biology, consciousness, and evolution. This cross-cultural consistency challenges conventional assumptions about hallucination or individual imagination, raising questions about whether the phenomenon taps into a shared archetype, a psychological constant, or even an external intelligence engaging with humanity across boundaries. Eyewitness accounts continue to explore themes of DNA, consciousness, and subtle instruction. Some experiencers describe witnessing strands of genetic material illuminated or reorganized, as if the beings were demonstrating the potential for evolution or hidden capabilities within the human genome. Others report impressions of energy flows, symbolic codes, or connections between mind and body. These modern experiences echo earlier narratives, while often incorporating insights from contemporary science, suggesting a continuity between past and present that is both fascinating and mysterious. In some ways, it is as if the mantis beings themselves adapt their interactions to the evolving understanding of those who encounter them, meeting humans where they are intellectually and emotionally. Paranormal researchers also examine the intersection of these encounters with sleep phenomena such as sleep paralysis, lucid dreaming, and out-of-body experiences. While some encounters appear to align with known sleep phenomena, others resist conventional explanation. Witnesses describe a clarity of perception, coherent spatial awareness, and intricate interaction that surpass ordinary dream logic. In certain cases, multiple individuals report simultaneous experiences in the same location, adding another layer of intrigue. Whether these shared experiences represent a collective psychological phenomenon, a form of group consciousness, or evidence of an external presence remains a matter of debate. Scientific inquiry into human consciousness adds additional context to these experiences. Neuroscience increasingly recognizes that the brain's capacity for perception, memory, and sensory integration is far more complex than previously understood. Liminal states may allow access to cognitive or perceptual dimensions ordinarily obscured, opening pathways for experiences that feel external yet are intimately tied to internal processes. The mantis beings then occupy a liminal space themselves, part external observer, part psychological archetype, and part threshold experience that bridges waking and dreaming. This duality is part of what makes modern encounters simultaneously captivating, calming, and mysterious. Importantly, the personal and cultural effects of modern encounters are profound. Many experiencers describe long-term shifts in perception, creativity, and introspection. Some develop interests in genetics, meditation, or consciousness studies. Others describe heightened empathy, patience, or awareness of subtle energy in themselves and the world around them. These aftereffects align closely with the calm, observational demeanor of the beings themselves. Encounters often leave witnesses feeling seen, guided, and gently encouraged to explore their own potential. In this way, the mantis narrative continues to serve a dual role, both as an enigma and as a quiet catalyst for reflection and growth. Across modern investigations, then a picture emerges of a phenomenon that is persistent, remarkably consistent, and profoundly affecting to those who experience it. Whether interpreted as extraterrestrial, interdimensional, psychological, or archetypal, the mantis beings appear as gentle yet intelligent observers, bridging gaps between ancient myth, modern science, and human imagination. They invite contemplation, curiosity, and calm engagement with the unknown, demonstrating that the boundaries of human understanding may extend far beyond the ordinary, accessible only in the quiet, receptive moments of night, dream, and reflective attention. The modern narrative is thus a continuation, an expansion, and a deepening of a story that humanity has been tracing across centuries. A story of beings that watch, study, and perhaps guide, gently unfolding the mysteries of life, consciousness, and evolution in a world that is still learning to see. As the experience of encountering mantis beings continues to intrigue and mystify, it invites us to reflect not only on the nature of these beings themselves, but on our own place in the universe. These encounters, regardless of their origin, be it extraterrestrial, interdimensional, or psychological, pose profound questions about consciousness, existence, and the unseen forces that shape our lives. The consistent calmness of the beings, their focus on observation rather than intrusion, invites a sense of reverence, a quiet invitation to pause and reflect on what it means to be human. They do not demand answers, but rather offer a space to explore, to wonder, and to sit with the mystery of life itself. Whether one views these experiences as metaphors for inner discovery or glimpses of otherworldly intelligence, the impact on those who encounter them is undeniable. These stories, shared in the quiet darkness, continue to shape our collective consciousness, fostering a sense of shared curiosity and possibility. As we drift into sleep, we are left with the quiet presence of the mantis beings, silent observers, gentle guides, urging us to look deeper into ourselves, into the cosmos, and into the mysteries that remain just beyond our reach.